She arrived with twins after her billionaire CEO ex tried to humiliate her. What happened next shocked everyone. "Are you really our daddy?" 3 words from a 3-year-old girl. 3 words that shattered a billionaire's carefully constructed world like a hammer through glass. But to understand why those words held such devastating power, you need to understand the woman who brought those children to that marble lobby, and the war that made this confrontation inevitable. Thessaly Ashcroft had never imagined herself capable of walking into Vandermeer Global Industries with her twin daughters and facing the man who'd tried to destroy her. Yet there she stood that morning, their small hands gripping hers, watching the security guard's eyes flicker between the children's faces and the massive portrait behind the reception desk. The recognition in his expression told her everything these girls had, their father's distinctive gray eyes, and everyone who looked at them would know exactly whose daughters they were. What drives a single mother to march into enemy territory with her children as her only weapons? Desperation, certainly, but something else too. Something that anyone who's ever been pushed past their breaking point understands the moment when you realize you have nothing left to lose, so you might as well go down fighting. 3 weeks earlier, Thessaly had been standing in her tiny apartment kitchen, twins playing in the living room, when the courier knocked. She'd signed for the thick envelope with hands covered in flour from the birthday cake she was baking. She'd opened it expecting an invoice from a client, maybe a contract renewal. Instead, she found legal documents that made her blood run cold. Corentin Vandermeer was suing her for defamation. The billionaire CEO who'd abandoned her when she was pregnant, who'd told her to handle it and then disappeared from her life, was now claiming she'd damaged his reputation. The basis? A single social media post she'd made 2 years ago, when she was sleep-deprived, overwhelmed, and desperate for some acknowledgement of what she was surviving alone. She hadn't even named him in the post. Just written something along the lines of how being a single parent meant being enough for 2 people, and how the person who should be there had chosen something else instead. Vague enough that no one outside their former social circle would know who she meant. Specific enough that everyone inside that circle absolutely knew. And now, he wanted to take everything from her. Her reputation. Her small graphic design business that she'd painstakingly built from nothing while raising infant twins. Possibly even custody of her daughters, if his legal team decided to paint her as unstable, vindictive, unfit. Before we go any further, I need you to do something important right now. If you haven't already, hit that like button seriously. Click it right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story about courage, about standing up to power, about protecting your children against impossible odds. And if you're not subscribed to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love, subscribe right now, because we tell stories that matter, stories that remind us what real strength looks like. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help these stories reach the people who need them most. Now, let's continue. Thessaly had called 3 lawyers that first day. The consultations had been brief and brutal. Against Corentin Vandermeer's legal team, with her limited resources, she'd lose. Court-appointed attorney versus sharks who billed more per hour than she made in a week, she'd be destroyed. The lawsuit itself didn't matter. Just defending against it would bankrupt her, ruin her business, devastate her life. She'd spent 3 nights after the twins were asleep sitting at her kitchen table with a calculator, trying to make numbers work that simply wouldn't work. Rent, food, childcare so she could work. Legal fees she couldn't possibly afford. The math was impossible. She was going to lose everything, and Corentin Vandermeer knew it. That's when the idea came to her. Sitting there in the dark at 3 in the morning, coffee gone cold, despair turning into something sharper, something that felt like clarity. He wanted to destroy her reputation? Fine. But he should know exactly what he was destroying. He should look into the faces of his daughters, daughters he'd never met, never held, never tucked into bed while he did it. He should see what his "handle it" text message had become, what his absence had cost, what his money transfers had actually bought him. Because Thessaly had a weapon Corentin didn't know existed. 2 weapons, actually. Identical 3-year-old girls with his eyes, his chin, his distinctive widow's peak. Living proof of what he'd walked away from. And if he was going to humiliate her in court, she was going to give him a preview of exactly what the world would see when this went public. The decision terrified her, bringing Marlo and Saren into this mess, using them as leverage. What kind of mother did that? But what kind of mother let her children lose their home without fighting back? with every weapon available. She'd explained it to them carefully that morning. They were going to meet someone important, someone who wanted to see them. She'd dressed them in their best dresses, the matching ones her mother had bought them last Christmas. She'd braided their hair, wiped their faces, prepared them as best she could for a meeting she had no idea how to predict. Marlo, the quieter twin, had sensed her anxiety. "Mommy, I'm scared," she'd whispered in the elevator of their apartment building. Thessaly had knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes. "Remember what we talked about? We're being brave together. Like superheroes?" Saren had asked, excitement overriding caution the way it always did with her. Exactly like superheroes. Now, 3 weeks after receiving those legal documents, Thessaly stood in that marble lobby and told the security guard she was there to see Corentin Vandermeer. The man's skepticism was palpable, but something about the twins made him reach for his phone, made him speak in hushed tones, made him finally gesture toward the elevators with an expression that suggested he knew he was witnessing the beginning of something significant. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt eternal. Thessaly caught her reflection in the polished doors and barely recognized herself. She'd worn her best dress, simple navy blue, professional without being provocative. She'd pinned her auburn hair back. The only jewelry she wore was her grandmother's thin gold necklace, a reminder of the strength that ran in her bloodline. She wanted to look like exactly what she was, a good mother doing what she had to do. Saren pressed her face against the elevator wall, watching the floor numbers climb. "Is Daddy very tall?" she asked, and Thessaly's breath caught. She'd never explicitly told them they were meeting their father, but children understand more than we give them credit for. They pick up on the weight of moments, the significance in their mother's voice, the way ordinary days suddenly feel extraordinary. "Yes, sweetheart. He's very tall. Does he know about us?" Marlo asked, and the question was so perceptive, so cutting, that Thessaly had to close her eyes for a moment. "He's about to," she said quietly. The doors opened onto a reception area that screamed wealth and power in every detail. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like a throne room surveying a kingdom. Modern art that probably cost more than Thessaly's annual income adorned the walls. And there, behind a glass desk that seemed to float in space, sat a woman Thessaly vaguely remembered from another lifetime. Isolde, Corentin's executive assistant. They'd met at charity galas back when Thessaly and Corentin were together. Back when Thessaly wore designer dresses and sipped champagne and thought she understood what her life was going to be. Isolde's perfectly composed expression fractured for just a moment when she saw the twins. Thessaly watched the woman's eyes widen, watched her do the mental math, 3-year-olds, gray eyes, distinctive features, watched understanding dawn and quickly get buried under professional courtesy. "Miss Ashcroft." Isolde's voice was careful, neutral. Mr. Vandermeer wasn't expecting. She glanced at Marlo and Saren, clearly uncertain how to finish that sentence. "Please, have a seat." "We'll stand," Thessaly said, and kept her voice steady, despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Standing meant they could leave quickly if necessary. Standing meant she wasn't settling in, wasn't getting comfortable. Standing meant this was business, not a social call. Isolde picked up her phone, spoke in tones too hushed to hear. Thessaly used the moment to study the space, looking for anything that might tell her about the man Corentin had become in the 3 years since they'd last seen each other. Awards lined one wall: technology, innovation, business leadership, humanitarian recognition. That last one almost made her laugh. Humanitarian. The man who'd abandoned his pregnant girlfriend was winning awards for humanitarianism. "He'll see you now," Isolde said finally, and something in her expression, pity, sympathy, warning, made Thessaly's stomach tighten. His office is through those doors. This was it, the moment she'd been preparing for and dreading in equal measure. Thessaly squeezed her daughter's hands, one on each side of her, and pushed through the heavy mahogany doors. Corentin Vandermeer sat behind a desk the size of a small car, his back to them as he gazed out at the city skyline. Power pose, theatrical entrance. He'd always loved these performances, these demonstrations of his importance. Some things clearly hadn't changed. "You have exactly 5 minutes," he said without turning around. "My lawyers advised against this meeting." But I was curious what kind of stunt you'd pull. What you could possibly say that would then turn around and satisfy your curiosity, Thessaly interrupted, and her voice came out stronger than she felt. He swiveled his chair slowly, his expression already hardened with contempt, prepared to dismiss whatever pathetic plea she was about to make. Then his eyes landed on Marlowe and Saren, and Thessaly watched the transformation happen in real time, watched the blood drain from his face like someone had opened a valve, watched his mouth fall open slightly, watched him grip the arms of his leather chair so hard his knuckles turned white. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Saren shifted beside Thessaly, confused by the strange man's reaction. Marlowe pressed closer to her mother's leg, sensing danger in a way children instinctively do. "Surprise," Thessaly said quietly into that silence. "You," Corentin's voice came out hoarse, strangled. "You brought children to a business meeting?" "I brought your children to meet their father. Since you were so interested in my personal life that you decided to sue me over it, I thought you should know exactly what you're trying to destroy." Corentin's eyes darted between the twins, taking in every detail with the focused intensity of a man performing calculations. The gray eyes that matched his own, the distinctive widow's peak, the cleft in Saren's chin, that was pure Vandermeer genetics. Thessaly could see him adding up the evidence, trying to find some way to deny what was obvious to anyone looking. "That's impossible," he said finally. "You told me you weren't pregnant." The anger that flared in Thessaly's chest was white-hot. "No. I told you I might be pregnant and that we needed to talk. You sent me a text message. I still have it. By the way, saying you were too busy with the merger and that I should handle it." She let those words hang in the air between them. Let him hear the weight of what he'd said, what he'd meant, what she'd understood. "So I did. I handled it. Alone." People always talk about fight or flight, but there's a third option nobody mentions. Freeze. The moment when your brain simply cannot process what's happening, so everything stops. That's what Thessaly saw in Corentin's face, now a complete system shutdown. The brilliant CEO who commanded boardrooms unable to form coherent thoughts because 3 years of carefully maintained ignorance had just detonated. Marlowe pressed closer to Thessaly's leg, her small voice barely a whisper. "Mommy, is he angry?" But Saren, braver or more curious, took a step forward, stared directly at Corentin with those eyes that mirrored his own, asked the question that would change everything. "Are you really our daddy?" The question broke something in the room's atmosphere, shattered whatever defenses Corentin had been trying to construct. He looked like he'd been physically struck, stood abruptly from his chair, walked to the window, his back rigid with tension or shock or some emotion Thessaly couldn't name. "Why now?" His voice, when it came, was barely audible. "Why bring them here now?" "Because you fired the first shot when you decided to sue me for telling the truth. You want to destroy my reputation? Fine, but you should know exactly what you're destroying. You should look your daughters in the eye while you do it." Corentin turned back from the window, and for a moment, just a moment, Thessaly saw something in his expression that looked almost like uncertainty. It was strange seeing doubt on a face that had always been so assured, so confident in every decision, every action, every word. "How do I even know they're mine?" Thessaly had anticipated this objection, had prepared for it, the same way she'd prepared for every possible response, every conceivable defense. She pulled out her phone with steady hands, steadier than she felt, and brought up the DNA test results she'd had done when the twins were 6 months old. Not for legal reasons initially, just for their medical records. But she'd known even then that someday this information might matter, that someday Corentin might want proof. She set the phone on his desk, watched him stare at the screen like it contained words in a language he didn't speak. Watched him read the results once, twice, 3 times, as if repetition might change what they said. When he finally looked up, his expression had shifted into something Thessaly couldn't quite read. Not anger, not acceptance. Something in between, something complicated. "What do you want?" His voice was carefully controlled now. Businessman negotiating a deal. "Money? For me to drop the lawsuit? Name your price." There it was. The assumption that everything could be solved with a transaction, that she'd come here to bargain, to leverage these children for financial gain, that this was just another negotiation, another contract to be signed. The presumption of it, the sheer arrogance, made Thessaly's voice crack despite her determination not to show weakness. "I want you to see them," she said, and heard the tremor in her words. Hated it, but couldn't stop it. "I want you to understand what you walked away from, what you chose your merger over, what you've missed for 3 years of their lives, first steps, first words, first birthdays, every single moment you should have been there for." She felt tears threatening and forced them back with pure willpower. "And then I want you to sign away your parental rights so we can all move on with our lives. So I can tell them their father at least had the decency to let them go instead of destroying their mother in court." Saren tugged on Thessaly's hand, her small voice worried. "Mommy, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, baby. I'm just tired." And she was. Bone deep, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with 3 years of carrying weight that should have been shared. 3 years of being enough for 2 parents. 3 years of answering questions about where Daddy was, with answers that broke her heart every time. Corentin circled his desk slowly, and Thessaly tensed, ready to grab her daughters and run if necessary. But he just crouched down, bringing himself to the twins' level, in a gesture that reminded Thessaly painfully of the man she'd once loved. Before ambition had consumed everything else, before mergers mattered more than people, before he'd chosen empire over family. "What are your names?" His voice was gentler now, almost careful. Saren responded immediately. Fearless as always. "I'm Saren. She's Marlowe. She's shy." "Marlowe and Saren," Corentin repeated. And Thessaly watched him taste those names, process them. "How old are you?" 3.5, Saren announced proudly. "Our birthday is November 16th. Thessaly saw the calculation happen in Corentin's eyes. November 16th. 9 months after the merger deal he'd been obsessed with. 9 months after the last time they'd been together. 9 months after he'd made his choice, and she'd made hers. The timeline was unmistakable, undeniable. "Do you like art?" Corentin asked Saren. And the question was so unexpectedly normal, so human, that Thessaly felt something shift in her chest. "I like coloring. Mommy says I'm very good." Marlowe whispered to Thessaly, still pressed against her leg. "Can we go home now?" Corentin heard it, stood up, stepped back, and Thessaly watched him rebuild his walls in real time. Professional distance reasserting itself. CEO armor clicking back into place. Whatever moment of humanity had broken through was being carefully locked away again. "This doesn't change anything legally," he said, and his voice was controlled again. Businessman discussing contracts. "I didn't expect it to," Thessaly replied, gathering her daughter's hands. "But now you know. Now you can't pretend they don't exist. You can't convince yourself this is just about some social media post. You know exactly what you're doing. I need time to process this." The audacity of that statement, the sheer entitlement of it, made Thessaly's response sharp as broken glass. "You've had 3 years. I had 3 minutes when the pregnancy test turned positive, and you weren't there to see it." She moved toward the door, twins in tow. "The offer stands. Sign away your rights. We'll withdraw the social media post. We'll disappear from your life permanently. Or don't sign, and we'll go to court. And every detail of your abandonment becomes public record. Your choice, Mr. Vandermeer." She turned to leave, proud of herself for holding it together, for not breaking down, for giving him no satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. "Wait." Corentin's voice stopped her at the door. Thessaly looked back over her shoulder, saw him still standing there behind his desk, looking lost in a way she'd never seen before. The lawsuit. He swallowed hard. It was never about the money or your reputation. His expression was raw, vulnerable in a way that seemed physically painful for him. "I saw your post that day. Saw you'd moved on, had a life, were happy. And he stopped, struggled with words that clearly didn't come easy. "I wanted you to hurt the way I hurt when I realized what I'd lost." The confession hung between them like smoke. Thessaly had expected many things from this confrontation: anger, denial, threats, cold dismissal. She hadn't expected honesty, hadn't expected him to admit that the lawsuit was revenge dressed as justice, that he'd tried to destroy her because she dared to survive without him. "Mission accomplished," she said quietly. "You've hurt me plenty, Corentin. But you know what? I survived. We survived. She looked down at Marlo and Saren, at their confused faces trying to understand adult cruelty. And we'll keep surviving, whether you're in the picture or not. This time when she walked out, he didn't stop her. The elevator doors closed on his stricken face. And only then, only when her daughters couldn't see her, did Thessaly allow herself to tremble, to feel the full weight of what she'd just done, to wonder if she just made everything better or catastrophically worse. The lobby, the street, the walk to her car, it all passed in a blur. She buckled the twins into their car seats with shaking hands, started the engine, pulled into traffic with her mind somewhere else entirely. "Mommy, was that really our daddy?" Marlo asked from the back seat, and the question nearly broke Thessaly's carefully maintained composure. "Yes, sweetheart. Why doesn't he live with us? How do you explain abandonment to a 3-year-old? How do you tell your daughter that her father chose business over family, that some people prioritize empire over love, that the world is full of people who walk away from what matters most? It's complicated, baby. Sometimes adults make choices that are hard to understand." "Will we see him again?" Saren asked. "I don't know," Thessaly answered honestly, because what else could she say? But 5 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, conditioned by 3 years of bill collectors and spam calls to let unknown numbers go to voicemail. Something made her pick up anyway. "It's Corentin. Don't hang up." She should have. Every instinct screamed at her to end the call, to protect herself and her daughters from whatever manipulation was coming next. Instead, she waited in silence, giving him nothing. "I want to drop the lawsuit. No conditions, no negotiations, just dropped." He paused, and she heard something in his voice she'd never heard before. Fear, maybe. Uncertainty. "And I want to know them, if you'll allow it. Not rights, not legal custody, just a chance to know them." Thessaly's grip tightened on the phone until her knuckles ached. "Why should I believe you? Because I haven't slept since you walked into my office. Because I keep thinking about what Saren said, that she's 3.5. I've missed 3.5 years of their lives. Thessaly, every moment you described, first steps, first words, I can't get that back." His voice dropped lower. "But maybe I don't have to miss the rest. This isn't about what you want anymore, Corentin. It stopped being about you the moment you sent that handle it text. This is about what's best for Marlo and Saren." "I know." The admission sounded like it cost him something. "That's why I'm asking permission instead of demanding it. That's why I'll accept whatever terms you set." Thessaly closed her eyes, thought about Marlo's shy smile and Saren's fearless questions, thought about the life she'd built for them, small but stable, poor but loving. Thought about what it might mean to let this man into their world, into their hearts. Thought about what it might cost them if he left again. "Supervised visits," she said finally. "Once a week. And the very moment you hurt them or flake out or decide this is too inconvenient, you're done. Permanently. No second chances after the second chance I'm giving you now." "Agreed. I'm not doing this for you," Thessaly clarified, needing him to understand. "I'm doing this because they deserve to know their father, even if he doesn't deserve to know them." "I understand." Did he? Could someone like Corentin Vandermeer, someone who'd spent 3 years building an empire while his children grew up without him, really understand what he'd thrown away? Could someone who measured success in quarterly earnings and stock prices comprehend the value of bedtime stories and scraped knees and crayon drawings on the refrigerator? Thessaly didn't know, but she was about to find out. The calls became visits. The visits became routine. Every Saturday at 2 p.m., Corentin Vandermeer appeared at Thessaly's apartment door, never late, never empty-handed. Always with something for the girls, art supplies for Saren, picture books for Marlo, simple gifts, thoughtful gifts, gifts that suggested he was actually paying attention to who they were rather than trying to buy their affection. He sat on her worn living room floor, this billionaire CEO in jeans and a t-shirt that looked strange on him and colored with his daughters. Thessaly watched from the kitchen while pretending to work, studied how he interacted with them, looked for signs of impatience or boredom, or the inevitable moment when he'd realize this was harder than he'd expected. That moment never came. Instead, she watched him learn, watched him figure out that Marlo needed extra time to warm up, that pushing her backfired, that patience was the only approach that worked. Watched him discover that Saren responded to challenge, that she needed space to explore, that her boldness masked a deep need for approval. Watching someone become a parent in real time is strange. Most people get 9 months to prepare, get to grow into the role alongside their child's development. Corentin was being thrown into the deep end with 3-year-olds who had personalities, preferences, histories he knew nothing about. The learning curve was steep. He climbed it anyway. 6 weeks in, Thessaly found him standing outside her apartment door 15 minutes early, holding a manila envelope that immediately made her suspicious. They'd been here before, legal documents, contracts, conditions. She took the envelope with the kind of wariness that comes from being burned. "Trust fund papers," Corentin said quickly, reading her expression. "For Marlo and Saren, before you say anything, this isn't about buying affection or access. It's about making sure they're taken care of. College funds, medical emergencies, whatever they need." He held up his hands, a gesture of surrender. "No strings attached. You control how it's structured, when they can access it, everything." Thessaly opened the envelope with shaking hands, looked at numbers that made her dizzy. This wasn't just college money. This was generational wealth. This was security beyond anything she could have provided alone. "Corentin, this is the bare minimum," he interrupted. "Literally the least I can do after 3 years of nothing. It doesn't make up for what I missed. It doesn't fix what I broke. But it means they'll never have to worry about tuition or medical bills or any of the financial stress that—" He stopped, looked away. "That I should have been preventing all along." She invited him in early that day, made coffee while the twins still napped, sat across from him at her tiny kitchen table, and for the first time since he'd re-entered their lives, they actually talked. Not about logistics or schedules or the children's needs, about the past, about what had happened, about why. "Why did you really sue me?" Thessaly asked, both hands wrapped around her coffee mug like it could anchor her. The truth this time. Corentin stared into his own mug for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of the CEO confidence she remembered. "Because seeing your post, seeing that you had kids, that you'd moved on, it destroyed me. I'd convinced myself that walking away was the right choice, that you were better off without me dragging you down with my obsession with work, that I was better off focused on building my empire." He looked up, and his eyes were hollow. "Then I saw proof that life went on without me, that you not only survived, but thrived, and I couldn't handle it. So you decided to destroy me instead? I wanted you to feel what I felt, powerless, replaced, irrelevant." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not proud of it. I'm actually deeply ashamed. But you wanted the truth." Thessaly absorbed this, processed it. You know what the worst part was? Not the pregnancy, or the twins, or the financial struggle, or even the loneliness. It was that I loved you. Really, genuinely loved you. And you threw me away, like I was a distraction from your real life. "You were my real life," Corentin said quietly. "I just didn't realize it until I destroyed everything." They sat in silence for a while after that, two people who'd loved each other once trying to figure out what they were now. Not lovers, not quite friends, co-parents, maybe. Two people bound together by children they'd made and choices they'd regretted, and a future they were carefully, painfully trying to build. The months that followed transformed them all in ways Thessaly hadn't anticipated. Corentin proved consistent in a way she'd never expected, showing up, following through, learning the girls' routines and preferences and needs. He learned that Marlo needed extra reassurance before bed, that Sarah needed space to make her own mistakes. He learned to braid hair, badly but earnestly. He learned to read Goodnight Moon with the exact inflection the girls demanded, doing the voices just right, turning pages at precisely the correct moments. And slowly, glacially, Thessaly's walls came down. Not all at once, not dramatically, just inch by inch, visit by visit, conversation by conversation. The man who'd abandoned her when she was pregnant was becoming the father her daughters needed. And watching that transformation, witnessing his genuine effort, his sincere commitment, his obvious love for Marlo and Saren, it complicated everything Thessaly thought she knew. Because it's easier to hate someone when they're consistently terrible. When they live down to your worst expectations. When they prove every negative thought you've ever had about them. But what do you do when they change? When they grow? When they become someone different than the person who hurt you? That's the question Thessaly found herself facing as winter turned to spring, as Saturday visits extended into weekday dinners, as Corentin's presence in their lives shifted from obligation to something that felt almost like belonging. And that's the question that would determine everything that came next. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because before any of that could happen, before redemption or reconciliation or any kind of future could be built, Thessaly had to face the past she'd been carrying alone. And Corentin had to understand exactly what his absence had cost. That understanding came in the form of a box. A simple wooden box that Seren mentioned one evening. Casually. Innocently. With no idea what she was revealing. "Mommy has a box with your name on it, Daddy," Seren said while Corentin was helping her with a drawing. "In her closet. She said it's private." Corentin's eyes met Thessaly's across the room. She felt her stomach drop. Felt exposure creep up her neck like heat. Those letters, the one she'd written during that first brutal year, when the twins were newborns and she was drowning and she'd needed to pour her heart out somewhere even if it was onto pages no one would ever read. "It's nothing," Thessaly said quickly. "Old paperwork." But Corentin wasn't stupid. He saw the way she'd tensed, heard the lie in her deflection. And later, after the twins were in bed, after he should have left but was lingering by the door the way he'd been doing more frequently, he asked about it. "Those letters Seren mentioned, were they?" He stopped, started again. "Did you write to me?" Thessaly considered lying, considered brushing it off, maintaining the privacy she'd guarded for 3 years. But what was the point? He was here now. He was trying. Maybe he needed to know what trying had looked like when he wasn't there to do it. "Yes," she admitted. "I wrote to you. Letters I never sent. From that first year, mostly. When I was." She struggled for words that could encompass that time. "When I was barely surviving. Can I read them?" Every instinct screamed no. Those letters were raw, unfiltered, desperate. They were her pain laid bare, her struggles documented, her darkest thoughts preserved in ink. They were never meant to be seen. "Why?" she asked. "What good would it do now?" "Because I need to understand," Corentin said, and his voice was stripped of ego, of pride, of everything except genuine need. "I need to know what I did to you, what I put you through. Not in abstract terms, but in actual, specific, undeniable detail." So, against every self-protective instinct she possessed, Thessaly retrieved the box from her closet, selected the first few letters, just the early ones, not the later ones where her pain had turned to rage, where her words would cut too deep. She handed them to Corentin with trembling hands. "Just the first few," she said. "The others are too personal." He took the box like it contained something precious and fragile, which, in a way, it did. And Thessaly knew, watching him leave with those letters, that something fundamental was about to shift. That you couldn't read someone's unfiltered pain and remain unchanged by it. That night, Corentin Vandermeer sat alone in his penthouse apartment, the architectural marvel that had once represented everything he'd achieved, and opened the wooden box. His hands trembled in a way they never did during board meetings or high-stakes negotiations. Strange how facing your own failures was more terrifying than facing your competitors. The first letter was dated 2 weeks after the twins were born. Thessaly's handwriting, once so familiar, flowed across the page in careful script that became increasingly erratic as the letter progressed. "Dear Corentin, the babies came early. 4 pounds each. They have your eyes, those distinctive gray eyes that made me fall in love with you in the first place. I named them Marlowe and Seren. Marlowe after my grandmother, who taught me what strength looks like. Seren after your mother, because despite everything, I remember how much you loved her. I wish you could see them. Marlowe has your widow's peak. Seren has that little cleft in her chin that's pure Vandermeer genetics. They're perfect. Tiny and fragile and perfect. The doctors say they're healthy despite being premature. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful they're here, that they're breathing, that they're mine. I just wish they were ours." Corentin's vision blurred. He set the letter down, took a breath that felt like broken glass in his chest, and picked up the second one, dated 1 month after the twins were born. "Dear Corentin, Lucas smiled today. A real smile, not just gas like the pediatrician kept telling me it was. It happened during a diaper change, and I caught myself reaching for my phone to call you before remembering you chose not to be part of this. I haven't slept more than 2 hours straight in weeks. My mother helps when she can, but she's aging, and the stairs to my apartment are hard on her knees. Twin infants are exponentially harder than I imagined. When one sleeps, the other cries. When both cry at the same time, I feel like I'm drowning. It's 3 a.m. right now. Both girls are crying. I've fed them, changed them, checked for fever, tried everything I know to do, and I'm so tired I can barely see straight. In my darkest moments I'm ashamed to admit, I understand why you left. I understand why this was too much for you. But then I look at their faces, and I know I could never walk away. No matter how hard it gets, no matter how exhausted I am. These are my children, our children, and somebody has to show up for them. I wish that somebody could have been both of us. Quarantine stood abruptly, walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The skyline that usually made him feel powerful now felt like a monument to everything he'd sacrificed for the wrong reasons. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done. He returned to the letters, couldn't stop, even though each one destroyed him a little more. 6 weeks after the twins were born. Dear Corentin, I saw you in Forbes magazine today. Your merger succeeded. You look happy in the photo, confident, powerful, every inch the successful CEO you always wanted to be. The article called you a visionary leader and one of the most promising entrepreneurs of our generation. I look like I've aged 10 years. There are dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer can hide. My clothes don't fit right because I haven't had time to lose the baby weight, haven't had time to think about anything except keeping 2 tiny humans alive. But the twins are healthy. Marlo is finally gaining weight properly. Saren is hitting all her developmental milestones. That's all that matters. I wish I could hate you. It would be so much easier if I could hate you. Instead, I just feel tired and sad and alone in a way. I've never been alone before. 3 months after the twins were born. Dear Corentin, the money transfers arrive each month like clockwork. $5,000 that appears in my account on the first of every month. I assume it's from you. Though there's no message, no note, no acknowledgement that these children exist beyond the financial obligation you're meeting. I hate needing that money. I hate that formula costs so much, that diapers are expensive, that daycare is impossible to afford. I hate that your money is the difference between us having a home and us being homeless. But I cash it anyway, because my pride matters less than my daughter's well-being. Because being a good mother means accepting help, even when it comes from the person who abandoned you. The twins are growing. They're 3 months old now. They're starting to develop personalities. Marlo is the quieter one, more observant. Saren is bold, always reaching for things, always curious. They're going to be amazing humans. I just wish their father could see that. Corentin read through the night. 13 letters total, each one a window into the hell he'd created by walking away. By the time dawn broke over the city, he was sitting on his bedroom floor with letters spread around him like evidence at a crime scene, and he understood, truly understood, what his absence had cost. Not in abstract terms, not in the way someone intellectually comprehends a fact, but in visceral, undeniable, devastating detail. Thessaly had written about the twins' first Christmas, celebrated in her tiny apartment with decorations from the dollar store because it was all she could afford. About Marlo's first steps, taken at 10 months while Thessaly was alone, with no one to share the joy. About Saren's first word, mama, and how Thessaly had cried because there was no dada coming. She'd written about the nights she'd cried in the bathroom, with the shower running so the twins wouldn't hear her. About the moment she'd looked at other families in the park, fathers pushing strollers, parents laughing together, and felt the weight of what her daughters would never have. She'd written about loving him despite everything, about how that made it worse, about how you can't choose who you love, but you can choose whether to show up for the people who need you, and he'd chosen wrong. At 6 a.m., Corentin drove to Thessaly's apartment. He knew it was too early. He knew he looked terrible. Eyes red-rimmed, hair disheveled, still wearing yesterday's clothes. He didn't care. Thessaly answered the door in her bathrobe, clearly surprised. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern when she saw his face. Corentin, what? I read them. His voice was hoarse from crying, from not sleeping, from carrying the weight of his own failures. All of them. Every single letter. She pulled him inside quickly, closed the door. "The twins are still sleeping," she whispered. "You can't." I had no idea. The words tumbled out, desperate, inadequate. I mean, I knew intellectually what it must have been like, but I didn't know. The Christmas with dollar store decorations, the nights you cried alone, the first steps I missed. Every single moment documented in those letters, Thessaly, and I wasn't there for any of it. Her walls went up immediately. Self-protection in the face of his emotion. It was a long time ago. It wasn't long enough to erase what I did to you. He stepped closer, saw her instinctively step back. "I'm sorry. I know that's inadequate. I know sorry doesn't give you back those nights of sleep, or those moments of joy I should have shared, or the support you deserved. But I am. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry." For a moment, Thessaly's composure held. Then it cracked. Years of carefully maintained armor suddenly gave way, and tears spilled down her cheeks the first time she'd cried in front of him since he'd re-entered her life. "I was so alone," she whispered. "Do you understand that? Not just physically alone, but completely, devastatingly alone, in a way that made me question everything about myself. Made me wonder what was wrong with me that you could walk away so easily. Nothing was wrong with you." Corentin's own tears fell freely now. Everything was wrong with me. I was a coward who prioritized the wrong things. Who convinced myself that success meant empire building, when it should have meant showing up for the people I loved. He asked permission with his eyes, and when she didn't pull away, he gently embraced her. They stood in her small entryway, as morning light filtered through the windows. Two people who'd loved each other once, who'd broken each other, who were now trying to figure out if broken things could be repaired. "I can never make up for those 3 years," Corentin said into her hair. "But I want to try. Not just for Marlo and Saren, for you. Because you deserved better then, and you deserve better now." Thessaly pulled back, wiped her eyes. "I survived it. We survived it. I know. That's what makes you extraordinary. That's what makes me ashamed I wasn't there to survive it with you." They ended up at her small kitchen table, drinking coffee while the twins still slept, and for the first time, they talked about everything. Not just the logistics of co-parenting or the schedule for visits, but the actual emotional truth of what had happened, his fears that had driven him away, her pain at being abandoned, the ways they'd both been broken by his choice, and the ways they'd both been changed. "What happens now?" Thessaly asked finally. "Now I show up," Corentin said simply. "Every day. Every moment I'm allowed to. I earn my place in their lives, in your life, through action, not promises." And he did. Over the following months, Corentin proved himself in ways Thessaly had never expected. His Saturday visits extended into weekday dinners. His presence in their lives shifted from obligation to something that felt almost like family. He learned the twins' routines, their preferences, their needs. He learned to braid hair properly after watching tutorial videos at midnight. He learned which bedtime stories required which voices, which foods Marlo would eat, and which made her gag, which activities calmed Saren when she was overstimulated. But beyond the practical learning, something deeper was happening. The wall between Thessaly and Corentin was eroding, slowly but undeniably. It happened in small moments, shared glances over the twins' heads when they said something adorable, coordinated responses to crises that proved they could function as a team, conversations that extended long after the children were asleep because neither wanted the evening to end. 4 months after the letter-reading incident, everything shifted. Thessaly's design client canceled a major contract, leaving her without the payment she'd counted on for rent. She sat at her kitchen table with a calculator, trying to make impossible numbers work. When Corentin arrived for his regular evening visit with the twins, he took one look at her face. "What's wrong?" She tried to deflect old habits, dying hard, but he pressed, and finally she broke. Told him about the canceled contract, the rent due in 3 days, the constant juggling act that was her life. She didn't cry. She'd learned not to waste tears on problems that required solutions, but Corentin saw through her composure. "Let me help. I'm not taking your money." "Then don't think of it as my money. Think of it as back pay for 3 years of child support I should have been providing all along." Think of it as what I owe you for keeping our daughters fed and housed and safe when I wasn't there to do it." He leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Let me do this. Please." The please broke her resistance. Thessaly had never heard Corentin Vandermeer beg for anything. The fact that he was begging to be allowed to help, not demanding, not assuming, but asking permission meant something. She let him help. And he didn't stop there. Over the next weeks, Corentin quietly handled not just her immediate rent crisis, but established proper child support that should have been in place from the beginning. He calculated 3 years of missed payments, adjusted for inflation and lost investment opportunities, and transferred an amount that made Thessaly's hands shake when she saw it. But the most significant change wasn't financial. It was personal. Corentin restructured his entire life around his newfound family. He promoted his deputy to CEO, stepping back from daily operations to focus on work that mattered, a passion project, creating educational software for underprivileged schools, something closer to his original dreams before ambition had corrupted them. He moved from his sterile penthouse to a house in Thessaly's neighborhood, a 10-minute walk from her apartment, close enough to be present without encroaching on her space. The proximity changed things. "I was nearby" became a common phrase. Dropping off groceries, picking up the twins for afternoon park visits. In Imendorf, there are mine. Inter 9. Later in 44. Integrating into their daily life instead of being a scheduled weekend addition. Thessaly's friends noticed. "He's doing it again," one warned. "Getting close. Making himself necessary. What happens when he leaves?" But Thessaly heard herself defending him, and the realization surprised her. He won't leave. How do you know? Because he's not the same person who left before. And he wasn't. The transformation was visible in every action, every choice, every moment of prioritization. When business calls came during family time, he silenced them. When opportunities arose that would have once consumed him, he weighed them against what they'd cost his family and often declined. When the twins needed him, nothing, absolutely nothing took precedence. 8 months after that first confrontation in his office, Corentin arrived at Thessaly's apartment with flowers. Not roses or expensive orchids, but daisies, the simple flowers he'd brought her on their first date years ago. "What are these for?" Thessaly asked, surprised. "For you. Because you're amazing. Because you raised 2 incredible humans alone. Because you gave me a chance I didn't deserve." He paused, swallowed hard. "Because I'm falling in love with you again. Or maybe I never stopped. I just lost my way." Thessaly's heart hammered in her chest. "Corentin, I'm not asking for anything," he continued quickly. "I don't expect you to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. You deserve to know." Before Thessaly could respond, Marlo and Saren appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with excitement at the tension between their parents. Saren stage whispered, "Is Daddy asking Mommy to marry him?" "No," both parents said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed the first genuine shared laughter they'd had since before everything fell apart. "But maybe someday," Corentin added quietly, looking at Thessaly. "If I can prove I've changed. If I can prove I'll never walk away again. Maybe someday you could trust me enough for that." Thessaly took the daisies, brought them to her nose, breathed in their simple sweetness. "You're doing the work," she acknowledged. "You're showing up. That matters." "Is that a maybe?" Hope crept into his voice. "It's a we'll see. Don't push your luck." But she smiled when she said it. And that smile told Corentin everything he needed to know, that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be rebuilt stronger than they were before. The following months were careful, tentative, beautiful. They dated while co-parenting, which created its own unique challenges. Stolen moments when the twins were with Thessaly's mother. Quiet conversations after bedtime. Rediscovering each other not as the people they'd been, but as the people they'd become. Their first kiss happened 3 months later, during a moment neither had planned. The twins were asleep. Thessaly and Corentin were cleaning up after dinner, moving around her small kitchen in the coordinated dance they'd developed over months of shared parenting. Their hands brushed, reaching for the same dish. They both froze. And then, finally, inevitably, Corentin leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, full of history and hope in equal measure. When they broke apart, Thessaly had tears in her eyes. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "I know. I am too." "You're scared?" "Terrified. Of disappointing you again. Of not being enough. Of losing all of you." His honesty was raw, vulnerable. "But I'm more scared of not trying. Of letting fear steal this second chance." "Slow," Thessaly said. "We go slow. Slow as you need." They took it slow. Dated for 6 months, while building the foundation that should have existed before, trust earned through consistency, love proven through action, commitment demonstrated in choices made every single day. 1 year after that first confrontation in his office, Corentin planned something special. He invited Thessaly and the twins to his house for dinner, nothing unusual. They did this regularly now, but when they arrived, the house was transformed. Lights everywhere, flowers, photographs covering every surface, documenting their journey from broken to healing to whole. The twins were dressed up, excited, clearly in on whatever was happening. Dinner was homemade Corentin's imperfect attempt at cooking, with obvious evidence of the twins' help in the flower on the ceiling and crooked decorations. After dinner, after ice cream had been promised but not yet delivered, Corentin knelt down. But instead of addressing Thessaly directly, he pulled out a small velvet box and handed it to Saren. "Will you and Marlo help me ask Mommy something very important?" The twins' eyes went wide with understanding and delight. Saren opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Nothing ostentatious, nothing showy, just perfect. "Mommy," Marlo whispered, finding her voice. "Will you marry Daddy?" "And be a real family," Saren added. Thessaly looked at Corentin, the man who devastated her and then spent a year proving he'd changed. At her daughters, watching with hopeful eyes. At the life they'd carefully, painfully constructed together. "I can't promise perfection," Corentin said. "I can promise presence. I can promise that every day, I'll choose you. All of you. I'll choose this family. I'll show up even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." "Yes," Thessaly whispered. Then louder, stronger. "Yes." The twins erupted in cheers. Corentin stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, kissed her, while Marlo and Saren danced around them chanting, "Ice cream! Ice cream!" And Thessaly realized something profound. The greatest love stories weren't the ones without mistakes. They were the ones where people made terrible mistakes, faced them honestly, and did the hard work of changing. They were built not on perfection, but on showing up. The wedding happened 6 months later, a small backyard ceremony with close family and friends. The twins walked down first as flower girls, throwing petals with excessive enthusiasm that had guests laughing. Thessaly walked alone, not being given away but choosing freely, walking toward a future she was building with her own hands. Corentin's vows were simple but specific. "I promise to show up when it's easy and when it's hard. I promise to choose this family every single day. I promise to be the father our daughters deserve and the partner you need. I promise to never stop earning this place beside you." Thessaly's vows were equally honest. "I promise to trust you with my heart again. I promise to build our future together, not in spite of our past, but because of what we learned from it. I promise to love you not for who you were or who I wanted you to be, but for who you've become. I promise to keep choosing courage over fear." The reception was joyful chaos. The twins danced with abandon. Family members who'd been skeptical of Corentin's return witnessed the transformation firsthand and adjusted their opinions. Friends who'd protected Thessaly through the hardest years saw her genuine happiness and relaxed their guard. As the evening wound down and guests departed, as the twins were carried to bed exhausted and happy, Thessaly and Corentin stood alone in the backyard where they'd just gotten married. "Thank you," Corentin murmured against her hair. "For what?" "For bringing them to my office that day. For giving me a chance I didn't deserve. For this family. For everything." Thessaly turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd broken her heart and then spent a year proving he'd changed. "Thank you for showing up. For doing the work. For becoming the man they needed. The man I needed." They stood there as the sun set. Two people who'd loved and lost and found each other again, with their daughters sleeping safely inside the home they were building together. The journey from that marble lobby confrontation to here had been painful and beautiful and transformative. Thessaly had brought her twins expecting humiliation. Instead, she'd found redemption not just for Corentin, but for both of them. For the family they'd almost lost and had fought so hard to rebuild, the house would be clean tomorrow. Tonight, they were just grateful. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for children who deserved better and got it. Grateful for love that was built not in grand gestures, but in showing up day after day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Whole at last. And that wholeness, earned through honesty, built through consistency, proven through action, was worth every painful step it took to get there. Because some things can't be rushed or bought or demanded. Some things have to be earned. And the most valuable things, trust, love, family, are always worth the work it takes to earn them right. This is what real redemption looks like. Not a dramatic transformation in a single moment, but the quiet, daily choice to be better than you were yesterday. To show up when it's inconvenient. To prioritize what matters over what's easy. To earn your place in the lives of people you love instead of assuming you deserve it. Corentin Vandermeer had been a billionaire before. Now, he was something much more valuable. A father his daughters could count on. A partner his wife could trust. A man who'd learned that the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or deals, but in bedtime stories, read, and promises kept, and love demonstrated through action. And Thessaly Ashcroft, who'd stood in that marble lobby with nothing but courage and two small hands gripping hers, had proven something too, that you can face impossible odds and win. That you can be devastated and survive. That you can be broken and rebuild yourself stronger. That the fiercest love isn't the easiest love, but the love that refuses to quit, even when quitting would be so much simpler. Their story wasn't perfect. It was real. And that made it better than perfect could ever be. Now, before we finish, I need you to do something important. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of Thessaly's courage, or Corentin's redemption, or the power of second chances earned through real change, then show your support right now. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Click it. Do it now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that people can change, that families can heal, that love can be rebuilt stronger than before. And if you're not subscribed to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love, subscribe right now, because we tell stories that matter. Stories that remind us what's possible when we choose courage over fear. When we show up even when it's hard. When we believe in redemption, earned through action. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help these stories reach the people who need them most. So like, share, subscribe, and thank you for being here for this journey. Thank you for believing in the power of stories that remind us what really matters. Now go out there and show up for the people you love. That's what this story is really about.